welcome back to our course on Excel 2019 Advanced. In this section, we're going to look at logical functions. Now, you've probably used the if function before. You might also be familiar with the Boolean logical functions, so and, or, not, etc. And there are one or two newer functions introduced, such as the if-s function and also the switch function, and those have been introduced in Excel 2016. The logical functions, although they're quite a small group in number, they are very important, and they are particularly important as your Excel workbooks start to get more complex. And the key important points about the use of logical functions is that they enable you to evaluate values of cells, and they help you ascertain what to do in any given situation on the basis of circumstances that might vary. So rather than always doing a particular thing, you might, for instance, compare a few values on a worksheet and put a number in another cell. Perhaps maybe you'll compare whether one value is bigger than another. And in its most basic form, we will use the if function for this purpose. And it's the if function that I'm going to demonstrate first. Now, as a very straightforward example, what I'm going to do is put a word in the cell C3 that says whether John's birthday is earlier than Jane's birthday or later than Jane's birthday. So all I need to do is use the if function here. So let's type equals if, and I have basically three arguments. The first argument is the logical test itself, and the test I'm going to do in this scenario is B3 less than D3? If that's true, I'm going to say earlier. If that's false, I'm going to say later. Close parentheses. Click the tick to confirm. And you can see that I have the answer of later in cell C3. Now, if I change Jane's birthday from 1990 to 92, and press enter, you can see that it now changes to earlier. So that's the if function. That's pretty straightforward. Now, whilst that was very simple, it does have some problems. What would happen if the birthdays were the same? Now, in the past, what would have happened is that you would have constructed a more complex if statement. For example, going back to cell C3, here we might first of all say if B3 equals D3, then put the same, or leave C3 empty. Then if it's not true, we would put the if statement we have now. But in Excel 2019, we now have the option of using an if-s statement. So I'm going to delete out what I have in cell C3, and we're going to type equals if-s, open parentheses. So our first logical condition is B3 equal to D3? If that's true, we're going to input the word twins into cell C3. Then we're going to do our second logical test. So if B3 is less than D3, input the word earlier into cell C3. And our third logical test, if B3 is greater than D3, we're going to input the word later into cell C3. Close parentheses and click the tick to confirm. So there we are. So that should start with earlier, of course, and if I put Jane's birthday back to 1990, you'll see I get the result of later. If I make both the birthdays the same, so let's change John's birthday, I get the result of twins. Now, as you can see there in C3, we have an if-s statement with three alternative conditions: equals, less than, and greater than. You can have up to 127 pairs of conditions and values there. It probably starts to become a bit unwieldy once you have quite a few, but you can certainly put many different conditions in there. But it's still not really quite right, because if I hadn't have entered John or Jane's birthday, what would happen? So let me delete out John's birthday. And you'll see I still get the result of earlier in C3, which isn't quite correct. So what I really need to do to make this accurate is I need to check that both of those cells have values before I construct my formula. So that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to build in a little check that will check if there is a value in cell B3 and in cell D3 before running the function. Now I'm going to stick with my if-else statement, but what I'm going to do is embed it in an if statement itself. And what we're going to say is that it's only going to apply the if-else function if there are valid dates in both B3 and D3. So I'm looking at both B3 and D3 containing numbers greater than 0. So let's do that. Let's wrap this if-else statement in an if condition, and we're also going to use the AND function in here as well. So if, open parentheses, and now we're going to use that AND function. And first we're going to check that B3 is greater than 0. And our next check is that D3 is greater than 0. Now if that's true, so if both B3 and D3 are greater than 0, then we'll run our if-else function. So the if-else is essentially the condition of the value if true. So what's our value if false? Let's jump across to the end, comma, and if that's false, so if B3 or D3 doesn't have a number greater than 0 in it, I just want it to put a blank. So we're just going to put a space within quotation marks on the end. Press enter to confirm. So now, because I don't have anything in John's birthday, so essentially cell B3 is blank, I'm getting nothing in C3, which is correct. Let's pop John's birthday back in, and I get the answer of later. So I can see that that formula is actually working correctly. Now let's look at one of the other new logical functions. This is the switch function. It's quite similar to if-else in some ways. The main difference is that we're only looking at the value of one thing, and in order to demonstrate the use of the switch function, we're going to look at the values in the Q column in our imported employee data. Now I'm going to work on cell S2, and I'm going to say that the formula is equals switch, and the value I'm going to test is the value in cell Q2. Now the first value I'm going to look for is the value admin. And if I see the value admin, what I'm going to do is put into S2 administration. The next value I'm going to look for is marketing, or MKTG. And where I find that value, I'm going to replace it with marketing. The next value I'm going to look for is R&D, and I'm going to replace that with research and development. Now right at the end, having identified the 3 cases where in effect I want to change the department to the full name of the department, what do I put as my default? Well, if I don't find any of those, the value I'm going to put in Q2 is just whatever is currently in Q2, so admin, engineering, sales, marketing, whatever that might be. So my final argument is just Q2. And click the tick to confirm. And if I copy down, you should see that formula in action. So wherever we have admin in column Q, we now have administration. Wherever we have MKTG, we now have marketing. And wherever we have R&D in column Q, we now have research and development in column S. So there we are. We've looked at a couple of the basic logical functions, if and I've also looked at 2 new logical functions, the if-else and the switch. And in the coming sections of the course, we're going to be using logical functions quite a bit. And so the first way we're going to use them is in exercise 1, which is in the next section. So please join